Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Thanks to the Cloud Foundry Foundation for sponsoring our podcast and live streams from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Basel, Switzerland. Learn more about the Cloud Foundry runtime and application runtime at cloudfoundry.org. Hey, Abby.
Hi, Alex.
I'm here with Abby Kearns, Executive Director of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. I'm Alex Williams of the New Stack, and we are live streaming and podcasting here from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Basel, Switzerland.
Live and in color.
Live and in color. So, Abby, we were just chatting a little bit, and one of the things you said really kind of intrigued me about how Cloud Foundry relates to kind of the overall kind of like technology landscape that we're seeing. You're talking about cloud native technologies and how in most cases what we see is like most people are not on the West Coast of the United States, right?
Most people are not.
Most people are not. Hey, pretty smart revelation, wasn't it?
Good job, Alex.
Thanks. Sometimes I come with these insights, it just kind of like shock myself. But a lot of companies are, in places where there's just not tons of developers kind of like teaming the streets, right? So how does Cloud Foundry treat that? Because a lot of what I hear today was I talked to Chip about the technology innovation, right? Kubo is now Cloud Foundry container runtime, right? And it's running with the application runtime on Bosch. And so we talked about Bosch and all this, right? But Cloud Foundry's had some real adoption, but how do you guys think about the community that you're developing and thinking about these companies in these places that may not be on the West Coast of the United States and having to really to think about how they're going to kind of be competitive where, in a market where really your business value is almost defined by your software approach?
Well, that's what digital transformation is all about. And I realize it's an overused phrase, but realistically, every company is becoming a software company. And what is key to that? Developers. Developers, as I said in my keynote, are the heroes of the story because they're actually the ones that are enabling all of this shift. They're enabling this transformation. And, as you pointed out, there are hubs around the world, not just the United States, but also here in Europe, where there's teams of developers and there's a growth around technology. But more often than not, these large enterprises are not based in those areas. And for each of these companies that are becoming software companies, they're looking to try to figure out where do they find that talent. And we already know from the research that we did last year, there is a skills gap. We already know there's a skills gap out there and a shortage of the available workforce. But as more and more of these companies are coming online, where do they look? Where do they find this talent that can support their needs? And we're seeing a lot of companies that are investing in training and retraining people, teaching people to be cloud native developers. And I think that is what is the most fascinating piece of all of this, is how those developers and how those companies are transforming their organizations and their culture to become cloud native.
Right. So how do you guys make that a community strategy for yourselves? How are you guys playing that out now, and how do you see it playing out as we move forward? I mean, developer friendly means to me abstracting the complexities so they can just do their work. They don't have to know how the operations infrastructure is necessarily running, or they just want to build their apps. But how do you translate into a strategy for the community, for the communities that are part of the Cloud Foundry world?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and it's obviously an ongoing one. Cloud Foundry offers the freedom for developers to just write code and get it out there into production as quickly as possible. With the container runtime announcement today, we're now giving developers choice. You can use the right tool for the right job, all within Cloud Foundry. If you want to have a Kubernetes-based container orchestration for your applications, or you can use Cloud Foundry the elastic runtime or now the application runtime, you have the opportunity to do container runtime or application runtime all within Cloud Foundry. And that gives developers the ability to make their own choices and putting control back in the hands of developers, which helps remove and break down walls and processes and really enables a deeper collaboration. What's also happening at the same time is open source is gaining a lot of momentum in these organizations. A lot of these organizations are now wanting to participate in open source. And so I think about the community and how do we make this community for end users of Cloud Foundry or of either of the application runtime or the container runtime. The power is in those users. So in our community, within the Cloud Foundry Foundation, 40% of our members are end users. And so I look to them to say, how do we continue to evolve both the technology, but also the community and the ecosystem around this to benefit their ultimate goal, which is making the most out of this platform. And that's where the excitement's going to come. 40%.
And I noted that in a tweet. The 40% are of your 40% of your members are users, right? So, in that respect, then, what is it that you're needing? What are some of the things that you're wanting to do through these, what are these kind of things that you're really wanting to do to continue to serve them? Because they've obviously found some value. How do you kind of up the value continually for them? I think it seems like you're doing things like making it much more developer friendly, for example, right? So you can run, so you can abstract Kubernetes to some extent, right? You can installing, as Chip was saying earlier. Kubernetes may be relatively simple to install, but then there's day 2, right? Then there's day 3. Yeah. So how do you think about that, when you're talking about these new technologies, because there is such a richness of technology out there and it can be overwhelming for people, but you guys need to let people know, hey, this is part of our effort to really make things better for you. So that continuum, I'm curious about how you're going to continue to do that.
Well, I think back to a pancake panel from last year where we started this conversation, and a fabulous woman in the audience mentioned this, and I've actually used it since then, is tyranny of choice.
Yes.
And I love that because it sticks, because when you think about cloud native and you think about this really quickly evolving ecosystem of technologies, it can be overwhelming. And so what we try to bring with Cloud Foundry is the discussion around cloud native, why it's important, what the value is, but then also a path to get there. We have, we want to enable you to have the ability to self-provision, get your ideas to the market faster, but also have the ability to access the right tools and the right ecosystem to enable that. And our goal has always been to make that as easy as possible, so that providing you that flexibility and that choice, but giving you strong enough guardrails and opinions to make it easy for you as an organization to adopt it and be successful. And the last piece is important. We want you to be successful with this.
I think bowling with guardrails is really a lot of fun. You ever bowl with guardrails? Like the gutter rails, right?
Makes it easier.
Makes it easier. So the gutter rails.
Knock down all the pins every time.
So what are those? So what are those new kind of rails that you need to extend out there so the developers can continue to build and innovate and get their work done and build these apps like Allianz is talking about, where small teams and and driving that innovation forward, because at some point you need to think way beyond just Cloud Foundry and thinking about the encompassing kind of path that they're on as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's first and foremost. But if you heard at this event today already alone on the keynote stage, we've talked a lot about not just Cloud Foundry, we've talked about the Open Service Broker API, we've talked about Kubernetes, we talked about the Cloud Native Computing Foundation and the innovations going on there. So, we are embracing cloud native, and our goal is to really help our enterprise users manage and have best of both worlds. A platform that enables them to provide their developers that freedom, the ability to self-provision, write code, and get it into production, but also giving them the accessibility to a broad native ecosystem around Cloud Foundry, as well as a broad set of easily to use technologies that exist around that. So thinking specifically Kubernetes, obviously, we talked a lot about today, but some of the other technologies that are coming up, like Istio and Envoy, and some of the other technologies that exist in CNCF, like Prometheus and things like that. So as you start thinking about the ecosystem and piecing those things together, it can be a little overwhelming. But giving people, here's a platform, here's a starting point, and now let's build on top of that, becomes a really powerful tool for organizations that want to be forward-thinking, but also have the strength around security and compliance.
I was also really interested to hear the panel discussion that Frederick Lardenois led that you were on with SUSE. And I love Frederick's first question, why are you here? But it became very evident why they are and why they're important to the Cloud Foundry Foundation. Tell us why like an organization like SUSE is important to have now in the community.
Well, I think, just their depth of experience on the Linux side. That doesn't seem off the cuff important to a platform, but absolutely it's fundamental. It's fundamental to container technologies. It's fundamental to the underpinnings of how all of this runs. So they bring that depth of expertise, that 25 years of expertise from a Linux distribution standpoint. They also bring a broad portfolio of services that they've built around that. And the capabilities as they're moving more towards the software-defined architectures and software-defined enterprises. And so they bring that expertise to the table alongside the fact that they will be offering the only other software distribution within our ecosystem, which is also immensely important. When you talk about having choice, as a end user, would you like to deploy it yourself? Would you like to have a fully managed hosted version of that? We have all of those options, and it's entirely dependent on the solution you want. So we're really excited to have SUSE at the table for all of those. In fact, that they've been part of this community for a couple of years already. Right.
And the membership continues to grow. Who are some of the other kind of new partners who you're excited about? You're excited about them all. I mean, come on, they're all your pals. But the more recent ones, who are some of the more recent ones? Like I saw InfluxDB, for example.
InfluxDB, I was super excited to have them part of the community, and they were at Summit in Silicon Valley earlier this year too. They are great because they obviously have a great open source data solution, but they've built quite a powerhouse around that. So having data services and data capabilities inside the community is important. And Comsisto recently joined, but we also had 2 new members, Home Depot and American Airlines, join the foundation. And then Volkswagen recently upgraded from a silver to gold. And what's fascinating is Volkswagen, Home Depot, and American Airlines are all gold members. So what that says to me is not only do they care about open source and want to be part of the community, but they want to be part of the community at a level where they can actually contribute and have a voice at the table and really want to drive things forward within the open source side as well as within their own organizations. And I think that's going to be such a powerful statement for these end users that are working through not only how to transform their business, but how to leverage open source in real ways.
I think one of the other noteworthy observations I had, at least, from my perspective, at least, came with kind of the Swisscom presentation about Dharma Kava and the these digital keys that you can remotely lock and unlock places.
Cloud Foundry can open your house.
Open your house, right? And but how Swisscom is extending its platform so companies can build out their own platforms, right? But now we're seeing this kind of extended effect where those companies now are influencing other companies in their supply chain.
Yeah.
Is that a new trend that you're seeing, an old trend? Is that kind of just, it seems to be kind of what I would expect is kind of helping fuel the membership.
It is. A lot of the members that we've got are coming through another distribution. So it actually is seeding the evolution. It talked about Volkswagen earlier today on stage. Volkswagen uses both Pivotal Cloud Foundry as well as open source, and they're now a member. So there's obviously that circle of life here where we're seeing them coming through a distribution, using that distribution of Cloud Foundry, but then saying, hey, I'd like to be part of the open source community as well. And I think that's immensely beneficial for us because, one, we need commercial success. We want Cloud Foundry to be commercially successful, but we also want our end users to feel like they have an opportunity to be part of the broader open source narrative and influencing where the technology goes and where the innovation happens.
Abby, I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, so I'm going to conclude it here, but I'm going to see you tomorrow morning because we're going to have pancakes.
I'm telling you right now, the pancake panels are the highlight of every event I get to go to.
Thank you, and we love having you as part of it. We're going to eat pancakes
and talk about Kubo.
And maybe we'll sing a little bit.
I don't know about singing.
All right.
It's too early for
we'll
singing.
see.
But if there's coffee and pancakes and Kubo, I think that sounds like a great idea.
Okay. All right. We'll save the singing for another time. There's a movie trailer with singing in it.
Perfect.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, Abby, for joining us. Another great event for the Cloud Foundry Foundation here in Basel, Switzerland. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks to the Cloud Foundry Foundation for sponsoring our podcast and live streams from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Basel, Switzerland. Learn more about the Cloud Foundry runtime and application runtime at cloudfoundry.org. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.